Welcome to Event Marketing Redefined. Happy New Year to everybody. I am in a sling. I'm one-handed, left hand, not my dominant hand. I broke my wrist. So happy New Year to me. Happy New Year to all of you. Thanks for being here. We have a really cool show today. So Sonia Murphy from SOCi, and she is the director of event marketing. And honestly, the exact type of person that we want to have on this show. Somebody with experience, somebody executing event marketing at a high level, opinions and thoughts on event marketing. And we have a really, I think, good conversation today. And as we kind of get down to the end of it, we're going to talk a little bit about smaller, more intimate events. We're going to talk about the sales funnel and how events can really impact the sales funnel. So Sonia, welcome. And thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Matt. I'm sorry about your arm.
It's okay. I got a broken wing. I think I told you first time, I was a little worried about doing my hair and getting a shirt on and stuff. The basics are pretty difficult, but very cool. We have some people piling in still. This is great. So let's get started, right? So Sonia, what I would love to start with is, as the director of event marketing for SOCi, give me just a little bit, what SOCi does, right? I know you guys are a marketing platform for brands that have multiple locations to like localize and operate, right? So just give us real brief what SOCi does and what you're doing for them.
You got it right. So we work with brands and properties that have multiple locations, and we help them basically manage their social listings and reviews on one platform. So for places like Ace Hardware that have multiple locations, it's nice for someone, usually, who's ever in charge of social, or maybe even the marketing director at that organization, to go in and manage all of that in one place. So really trying to make their life easier, also helping with their ranking in the end, SEO ranking on Google Business. So the goal is really to kind of end up in that top 3 ranking.
Very cool. So director of event marketing, give me a little bit, tell us about your events throughout the year. What are your big ones? What are you working on? What type of events are you executing?
Yeah, so we do a lot of events.
Nice.
like most people. We have one side of the business that's really focused on my team that's focused on virtual events. So we are consistently running webinars and virtual events each quarter. We try to do at least 5 to 6 a quarter.
Yep.
Those are related to ongoing campaigns that we have, and kind of tying in the messaging around the webinar, guest speakers around the current campaigns. And then there's another side of my team that's really focused on in-person. Again, a lot of trade shows, conferences that we participate in, both on the brand side and property side. We have shows that we kind of deem as tentpole, meaning like shows that we consistently go to year over year, that we want to make sure we have a big presence at. And then we also do a lot of now regional shows. So more smaller, intimate events that we've kind of found to be very successful in terms of building relationships with prospects and clients that attend.
That's great. I think what's really cool about your role, how you mentioned how you have 2 teams, right? And you're working virtual and in person. And I think that's something we touch on a good bit in this show, is essentially, how people need to marry those up together moving forward, that they're separate in a way, but also they need to work in unison in terms of messaging, goals, what you're trying to accomplish. How has that gone for you? Like managing these 2 different aspects, during the pandemic, after, I guess you'd say, but how's that going?
It's different, but the same. So
okay.
The key things that are similar, I would say, are messaging. So how are we trying to get people that want to attend, whether in person or virtual, to attend, right? So really kind of focusing on understanding who we're targeting to attend or engage with us, and kind of building the messaging around that, I think, is extremely important. I think on the webinar side, the anticipation, I think, as you know, is trying to get as many people to sign up, because, the drop off is going to be relatively high, right? Like industry standard is 30 to 40% drop with virtual events. So just making sure that it's volume, trying to get as many people as possible. And I think since COVID, I found that the timeline for people to sign up varies.
Okay.
So we try to promote like three weeks out, 2 to 3 weeks out, to try to have enough time to reiterate over and over again that there's this event happening online. In terms of in person, again, it's important to, like I said, the communication piece, definitely trying to draft that to try to get people to get engaged, come and attend in person, understanding who we're targeting and crafting the messaging around that. I think it's also about the experience, quite honestly,
Yeah.
because people like me work from home now, right? So what's going to be the added bonus of me wanting to leave my house to go somewhere to see people,
Yeah.
right? Like it's got to
Yeah.
be engaging and interesting enough for me to kind of want to commit to something like that. So I think keeping that in mind is really important as well.
Yeah, I think some good things you said there I want to point out. A is the messaging piece, right? So it doesn't matter whether it's virtual or in person. Messaging is so key, like how you express and how you relay to your customer, to your audience, whether, virtual or in person, I think is vital to just anybody's success. And then what you kind of mentioned about the engagement, the experience, like what does that look like? So really, whether it's virtual or whether it's in person, I mean, you're constantly considering what is their experience, right? When they log in, or whether you meet them in person, whether they come to your trade show booth or your event. And I think those are it's a good rundown. It's, some really good points. Give me your biggest, I love asking this question. What is your biggest struggle as the director of event marketing? What do you cringe thinking about?
Oh my gosh. I have been fortunate at SOCi to work with a really great sales leadership team who are supportive and for the most part,
Yeah.
get behind, like, I always say like marketing can do its best to try to get people to attend something, right? But we really need buy-in from sales and for them to be able to kind of help us, because it's the salespeople that have the relationship with the people that we're targeting, or trying to build a relationship with the people that we're targeting. So that being said, sales sometimes can be frustrating. I think any marketer would say that, having to communicate things 100 times, 100 different ways for it to kind of be able to sink in, and making sure that everybody's like aligned, right? So I think, like I said, I've been fortunate enough at SOCi that I work with really great sales directors that are super supportive. But yes, that's definitely something that keeps me up at night sometimes, is just making sure everybody understands what's happening and is supportive of it.
So I think so I love that topic, just in the sense, so let's dive down that a little bit. Like, how important do you think it is for marketing and sales to be connected and in unison when it comes to events? Because I can tell you, it's just some horror stories, right? Not on the same page. Salespeople don't know what's going on. Marketing people not communicating, and I think it's a disaster. And I always see it as a sign of strength when marketing and sales is aligned. So I'm just curious your thoughts on that.
I think what's been helpful is understanding what each other's goals are, going into something and coming out of it, right? So like, are we on the same page of, first of all, why we should be going to this event?
Yeah.
Like, do we agree that this is the best use of our time, money? Is there another channel we could utilize that might be better for what we want? So having those kind of hard conversations first, and then, really being on the same page about the KPIs that we want to come out of the event. So, we have very clear KPIs in the sense, like, we know we have to have X number of engagements on site and at an event with X number of opportunities or ROI after, right? And as much as you can kind of align that figure with what sales is looking for, I think is super helpful. And that's something that thankfully, I think more marketing and sales leaders are looking to do, to kind of marry those goals in the same, have the same numbers or have the same KPIs. So that way everybody's kind of aligned, which is great.
Yeah, I think it's really good. I mean, I would definitely encourage any event marketer on this who's listening, like, if you're not connected with sales leadership, and you're not aligned in goals and you don't understand each other, I feel like you have to be, to really have full success in your events. You have to be on the same page.
Yeah. And it's what you mentioned too, like having regular communication about it too, right? So like 4 weeks out, 2 weeks out, 2 days out, whatever, like it's a
Yeah.
broken record about like, here's what
Yeah.
we need to do. Here's where we're at. Here's what we got. Like just constant
Mhm.
communication.
Yeah, I always reference a story to people. I have a friend of mine worked for a huge software company probably about 4 or 5 years ago. He was in Orlando in town for a trade show. And, I slid down to go see him, walk the show. I went over and saw him. Him and I are just briefly talking. And I'm like, hey, how's this going? What's going on here? What are you guys working on? Blah, blah. He's like, I have no idea. I mean, literally, and he's a very good salesperson, right? He's like a
Yeah.
successful, good. He goes, no one's even spoke to me prior. Like they just flew. I mean, what a waste. Like what a waste of money, time, resources, and effort of being there. So I think it's a strong point, and it's something I would love to hear more from marketers and event marketers like yourself saying like, we need to be super connected, right? We need to have the same goals, because that's kind of how you're going to go get results at your events. I would love to hear about one of your biggest accomplishments. What's something that maybe you worked on that maybe you were really proud of?
There's a lot of events that I've worked on over the years that I am proud of for sure. I think outside of the events, one thing that I worked really hard on that I'm proud of is I worked on creating an event marketing course at National Louis University that was just an introductory course for
Yeah.
students that are low income minority students that don't typically end up in this field. So it
Okay.
was really, that was a great kind of challenge. I've never written a course in my life. So
Yeah.
I had to
I can
work with,
imagine. Yeah.
yeah, I worked with someone from National Louis and put together this 6 and 10 week course for students there, which was really awesome. So that's like a personal kind of thing that I did that I'm super proud of, to be able to kind of open the door for most people that might not consider this as a opportunity for them. In terms of like actual events, oh my gosh, there's so many cool ones that I've done. Like I worked
Mm.
with celebrities and rock stars and sports people, and that's always fun to kind of do those. I actually think like the ones that have been more meaningful to me have been like the smaller scale
Mhm.
events, because you get more opportunity to really kind of connect not only with the sales team that's
Yeah.
participating, but also the prospects and clients. And I found those over the years to be really valuable. And I've done them across my career, whether that's been like lunch and learns or roadshow kind of events or
Yeah.
smaller trade shows or dinners. Like those I've really found to be a real joy to kind of work on. But yeah, I'd say that.
Yeah, those are cool. And I mean, we're going to talk a good bit about that here as we roll through, because I think that whole concept of smaller, more intimate events, event marketers are looking around and thinking to themselves, okay, where can we really make impact? Where can we really engage? Where can we really get face to face, get intimate, and draw an impact that when we leave this event or we leave this face to face gathering, we've essentially feel like we've really accomplished something that's trackable, measurable. So I think that's something we'll dive into. Give me a little bit of a philosophy of yours for like event marketing success. What do you think are some basics maybe that you wrote in that course, or things that you think is, that you've kind of lived by?
Yeah, I've become much more, like I mentioned earlier, like events are not always the answer. I think that comes from just having a marketing background, right? And I hate to
Yeah.
say that because I obviously enjoy what I do and events are fun.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it might not be what the company or team necessarily needs when you're looking at what the goal is or what the
Mhm.
intended outcome is. So definitely that, like, let's consider all avenues or all channels and what would be the most effective. I think also trying to be more campaign focused. So we're a
Yeah.
channel. How do we fit into the
That's a great one.
larger messaging
Yeah.
um, campaign that might be happening around a product launch or
Yeah.
an enhancement that's happening? So that's also been definitely something I think I have been consistently thinking about. I definitely try to work with as many people that are smarter than me. I know that sounds
Mm.
kind of cliche, but
No, it's a life hack,
um,
right? That's
yeah, it
that's
is. It really
it's a life
is.
hack. Yeah.
Like I think people that I've hired over the course of my career, I've definitely tried to make sure that they're smarter than me.
Hmm.
And it makes you look good if they're smarter than you.
Yeah.
And there's things that, that they might be better at than I am. And I'm not afraid to
Yeah.
kind of admit that, which is good. I am much more strategic focused, I think, than I used to be when I started out in this field. I think I was
Hmm.
just very focused on the details and the way things looked,
Yeah.
which all
Yep.
matter. But I think I am much more focused on the strategy and the thought process behind what we're doing, like I said earlier. And I think I'm much more data driven. So definitely leaning in on the
Mm.
data, looking at, especially when we're analyzing like what shows we want to participate in, right?
Yeah.
Like trying to get a list of people that normally go our companies out of 10, really deep diving on that and looking at the percentage of people that are actually people that we want to talk to, or it
Hmm.
might be existing clients. So definitely looking much more at the data, looking at how we've performed in the past attending, and looking at the spend too, which is always fun, looking at the spend
Yeah.
and whether or not,
Yeah.
the spend was worth what we got out of it. So definitely much more data driven, I think, than I initially was as well. And that's kind of been the course of how things have changed since I started doing this in 2010. Like,
Hmm.
I feel like initially it was much more like surface level. It was about like,
Hmm.
how do things look and how many people can we get to go, and
Yeah.
kind of like that initial stuff. But now and thankfully I've had great leaders during my career, directors
Mhm.
and VPs who have been like, you need to really start leaning into the data, like go
Mhm.
into Salesforce and see how things are performing,
Yeah.
and really doing deeper dives into that. So yeah, I'd say all that.
So yeah, okay. So that was a really great answer. I want to say for anybody who's on here and then anybody listening to this when it comes out in podcast form, that was an exceptional answer. Like there's so much good stuff in what you just said, right? So one of the things I want to hit on first is like the big picture strategy thinking, and not just saying, oh, we're doing this event just because we're doing it, but thinking more high level. We talk all the time on this. I want to push event marketers to talk to leadership, question, where are we going? Why are we going? This show, why are we executing this way? Where could the dollars be spent better? Like for me, those are, we say, path to promotion town. Like executives and leadership at big companies are looking for marketers and event people, like you, who are asking these questions and who are trying to turn those dials and make things better all the time. So that strategy piece, huge. The campaign bit that you just said, I love that. Like, I mean, just thinking in terms of campaigns that are going on. How do you tie in? How do you marry it to those? And then the last piece on data. I mean, data is huge. Everything's changing. We actually, last live show, we had Jessica Sabila on from the Exhibitor Advocate, and data is just a huge battle that they are fighting right now. Not battle, it's something they're trying to help exhibitors with and get them more data. So just that was an awesome answer for anybody listening. That is, and on here, it was a really good answer. Nice job there.
Thanks.
Yeah, really good. What keeps you up at night? I mean, what keeps you up at night?
Anybody that does this for a living, I always laugh at this. There's like a ranking of the most stressful jobs in the world, right? And event
Where's
planners
this rank?
always like it's between like firemen or police officer, like event planners up there. And
It's
I think it's
amazing.
because I'm not even joking. Like I think if you Google it, you'll see it.
Great. Yeah.
Things that keep me up are typically before an event. I think like anybody who is on this call that does this for a living is just the details, like mulling
Yeah.
over minute by minute. And I really try to kind of, when I'm thinking through an event, I'm really trying to put myself in the attendee's shoes every time. So I try to
Yeah.
think like minute by minute when I'm walking through the door, like what is happening every second of every minute. So definitely the details are what
Yeah.
keep me up at night. I'm not so worried, and this might sound terrible, but I'm really not necessarily worried about the performance, because I think what I found is even if things aren't necessarily well attended, like let's say you wanted, 100 people to show up and you only got 75, right? I think that's okay as long as those 75 had a meaningful experience and walk away with maybe a better understanding of your company or a better
Mhm.
interaction with any of your salespeople or you or anybody on your team. Like I think that's okay. So really kind of the overall performance of events don't really keep me up at night. It's really the details.
Yeah.
Like, did we buy the cord that we needed for the laptop, or, those kinds of
Yeah.
like really niche details.
Think a lot of people I think that'll resonate with a lot of people, right? Like those
Oh,
details
yeah.
are so important. There's so much that comes together overnight, and, the last few weeks, and just, the details matter, right? I mean, that's actually something we say at Rockway to each other. We say the details matter. And it just means that those things are really what bring everything together. And just basically seeing that, like, most people in events, I don't want to say are perfectionists, but they are thinking.
We are.
That,
yeah. We are.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
All right. So let's jump into what you and I really wanted to get into for a chunk today, which is like this shift in trade shows, right? This shift in concept. And I spoke 2 weeks ago with Debbie Kemp from Canon Medical, and like, she basically has put on a road show in replacement of some of these trade shows, or in unison with some of these trade shows. So I think event marketers, especially really crafty, seasoned ones who know what they're doing and understand engagement and are really trying to drive results, there is a shift from these larger, grandiose conferences to more intimate, I don't call them micro events, but these alternative ways of connecting to customers. So I'd love just to get going. I mean, you and I talked about quality over quantity, right? Just give me some of your thoughts. Let's kick this off and talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So definitely agree about the quality over quantity. I think there tends to be this thought that, especially from our friends in sales, like, we need to be everywhere all the time. Everybody needs to see us. And I think again, like I said before, you need to be kind of methodical, really leaning into the data to kind of help determine like what places you do need to be at versus not necessarily. Yeah. And again, like making sure like, okay, yes, an event is the right thing we should be doing in this situation. And it ties into what we're doing from a campaign perspective, which makes sense. So kind of having all those things aligned. I think that, with COVID happening, I mean, I remember I was at a huge show in San Francisco and my phone started blowing up. And this was like, the last week of February, first week of March.
Oh boy,
in 2020. And I was getting pinged from my friends in the industry and from companies that we, have worked with that were planning to go to their shows, just cancellation.
Yeah.
And it was devastating at the time, I think, for all of us, right? Like, what are we supposed to do with ourselves? But all that to say, I think it kind of needed to happen in a weird way with the show perspective, because I think the shows were it was a lot. And I don't think that everybody was necessarily getting what they wanted out of them. I think there's really been this shift in mindset. Now that we're not back to the 2019 numbers that we were at, for sure. I haven't seen that reflected in the shows that I've been at over the past year, but I will say the shows are well attended. They're not, empty halls, but it's really kind of going back to what I said a bit ago, which is like, what's going to motivate me to get out of my house and go to something, or book a flight or participate at this conference. So for the trade show and conference planners, I think that's been hard. Definitely. Like, how are we going to kind of set ourselves apart? But I think also from us as sponsors or participants, it's like, okay, what can I do to kind of help make their experience better, or help them achieve what they'd like coming out of the show as well? And I don't know that those conversations necessarily happened before. Like, they're just happy to take our money to sponsor or participate, but not necessarily give us the stuff that we needed or wanted coming out of it. So I think that has changed, which I'm happy to see. I will say, though, that the bigger shows, it's still very hard to connect with people at a big show. You're talking about thousands of people going, especially if you're like a small company. It's very hard for you to kind of stand out in all the noise if you don't have millions of dollars to spend on a booth design. So I think in my experience, and this is even when I worked for big companies where we had like the double decker booth and like the huge, we had like a car that we gave away at a show, like all of that stuff.
Yeah.
I think, there's a very surface kind of level of interaction that happens. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Like most people that come by, they might already know you, they're a client, they're just coming by to say hi and check in,
Yeah.
and it's nice to see you. It's also people that might not have ever heard of your organization before, wondering
Yeah.
what you're doing. Can we get some preliminary information? So it's kind of like those very, I hate saying they're surface level interactions, but they're really, there's just so much noise and things moving and lights and bells and whistles that it's
Yeah.
really hard to kind of have these moments where you can really connect, like I'm connecting with you on this call, right? Like face
Yeah.
to face, having a
Yep.
conversation. So what I found over the years, and especially coming out of COVID, is that people are really hungry to connect. Like
Mhm.
just really have time to be able to talk. And I think I told you this before, but not necessarily over business. And I know that sounds terrible, but because we're all trying to sell something and it is about our
Yeah.
business and growing our businesses. But before you purchase anything from a vendor and you're going to spend thousands of dollars, you're going to want to work with someone that you trust. And it's part of building that relationship and having FaceTime in a different kind of setting where there's not as much noise kind of gets it over the finish line. Does it make sense? Like,
It does. Yeah. No,
yeah,
it 100% does. That is such a big piece for me for face to face is the connection, is the meaningfulness, the experience of being together, of experiencing something together. I couldn't agree more with that. Yeah. I mean, absolutely it does.
yeah, and really helps you kind of connect on a human level,
Hmm.
right? Whether you're talking
Yeah.
about business or not. So throughout my career, I've kind of found those kind of experiences or events that we can curate ourselves in tandem, maybe with a trade show that's happening,
Hmm.
or regionally doing, like you mentioned someone's doing a road show, like road shows or lunch and learns, or just having these experiences where it's kind of like a tighter knit community getting together. I think have been more successful, honestly, from my perspective in this business.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking about that, the big conferences, and you and I spoke about this. We talked about the sales funnel, right? Top, middle, bottom.
Yeah,
Middle and bottom are people that you're already building a relationship with, rapport with, and too many of these large annual conferences are focused on putting people into the top of the funnel, people that you don't
yeah,
know, people that are prospects. Whereas these more intimate events, when you get something a little more, like you're saying, when you can truly connect, when you can truly find a way to deliver an experience and connect, you can now move people through that funnel
correct.
out the bottom per se. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, you're still going to need people at the top funnel, right? So you're still going to need to do the trade shows. You're still going to need to show up every year. That's why when you ask me kind of what we're looking at for this year, it's a mix of that, right? So it is a
Yep.
lot of trade show because we want to constantly fill the pipe, but then it's also these experiences that are smaller scale to kind of keep people going through the tunnel, like you said, or the funnel. I'm sorry. Um,
Well, tell
so
me
yeah, I
about
think.
those. So I'm
Go ahead.
curious, like, I think people are going to want to know, like, those, because most of the trade shows, and there's a question here that I want to get to, but most of the trade shows, I think people are searching for ones that broad stroke are going to get them in front of their audience, right? And I think mostly
Mhm.
everybody can find their big annual conferences. I would encourage people to maybe find a little bit of the offbeat trade shows that you didn't think the right customer would be there, because we have a lot of customers that have found these incredibly niche, little smaller trade shows where they really return a ton of ROI. But tell me a little bit about what you're talking about when what you're accomplishing maybe in these smaller events, more intimate things that you shifted to.
Yeah, so I think, like I said, it's about that relationship building, right? That's really what we're accomplishing at these, and being able to kind of like have really deep conversations about the business too, right? Like
Yeah.
being able to talk through like questions that someone may have, or we've also found it, and in my experience throughout my career too, like having clients come to those as well to be kind of like your advocate when you're talking to prospects to kind of back up what you're saying or like, I'm a client of X company and it's been great for me. Like having those kind of testimonials live too has been extremely helpful. So just being able to create this environment where it's friendly, it's fun, but it's also
Mm-hmm.
like an opportunity for people to be able to get any questions they have answered,
Mm-hmm.
honestly, whether by
Yeah.
us or by a client that's there who can weigh in as
Yeah.
well, I think is really key. Yeah.
And that is the connection, right? Because like you mentioned, when you're at these big annual shows, it's a little surface level. It's very difficult. So we have a question from Dr. Ramsey. I'm sorry, my chat skills are not great. I'm using my left hand and it's tough, but let's go. So Dr. Ramsey, it's either Nashed. Either way, I apologize on the pronunciation, but it says, what kind of marketing at a trade show has the best ROI for a small medical device company? It's an interesting question.
What kind of marketing at a trade show?
Yeah.
So I think it comes down to, what your goal is. Again, if your goal is like to really just build awareness of your company
Mm-hmm.
and introduce people to your brand
Yeah.
company, I think exhibiting is a great way. If it's more so like you have some folks that are already attending and you want to be able to connect with those people at a show, I think being able to kind of have a meeting space is really amazing. And a lot of conferences and trade shows are offering that now, whether that's like you can purchase like a suite or a room
Mm-hmm.
at the hotel it's at, or they kind of do these build out spaces where you
Yeah. Oh
can
yeah.
have a meeting, right? So if you can't
Love
afford
that.
to have
Yeah.
like a super big booth, it's a great way to kind of connect with people and have like a meeting on site. And I think there's also like, again, if there's people that you're connecting with that maybe you've already built an existing relationship with, but still aren't necessarily a
Mm-hmm.
client or have crossed the finish line.
Yep. Yeah.
Doing
Haven't
something,
crossed the finish line.
doing
Yeah.
something at the show, but outside is fun. So like a dinner,
Yeah.
a happy hour, like inviting them just to connect on a purely social level, because at that
Mm-hmm.
point they should basically have a good understanding of your business and what it does. And it's more so again about that relationship building. So those would be kind of the suggestions I'd make.
No, I like those. And Dr. Ramsey, I would throw in there. I mean, we work with a good bit of medical device companies. What I like about medical device companies is that it is a product, right? And I always say people who have a product, essentially, I'm looking for differentiation, right? I'm looking for what makes your product different. What is really in your market? What about your product stands out, is better, different? What categorizes or positions that product in the best light to the audience? It will resonate. And I think a trade show is a really good opportunity, like Sonia mentioned earlier, to build messaging and position yourself at that trade show. So I think in terms of best ROI and marketing, I would be considering marketing yourself that way as a small medical device, like really dialing into why does your audience need this product, like this product? What's the advantage of this product? I would be thinking in terms of that. So anyway, we have a bunch of questions here. This is great. I love questions. I'm terrible with the mouse here, but we have a question from Tess. I can't get this here. Sorry, I apologize. My hand. Maybe it's in the Q&A and be easier for me to read. Sorry. Yeah, from Tess. It says, how do you cut through the noise at trade shows? For example, receptions, sponsored happy hours, special events, when inviting folks to these more intimate, tailored meetings while on site. So how do you cut through the noise at trade shows when inviting folks to these? It's a very good question.
Yeah, it's hard,
it.
right? Like it's not easy for any of us. I think it really goes back to the messaging, right? So really understanding who you're talking to. So understanding your personas and being able to kind of craft around that. I think, any kind of thing you can throw in there that makes it fun or a different experience for people is also great. I know it's hard with budgets, right? Like we can't give people the moon, although we'd like to get them there. But
Yeah,
trying to be
sure.
creative and think of maybe something cool or different that maybe they haven't experienced before. So,
Yeah.
but I think the real key is the messaging.
Mm.
So from the minute they get their email, what does it say? And how is it specifically crafted for this person that I'm reaching out to? Or what does the landing page look like for them when they go to sign up? Does it
Yeah.
look appealing? Does it kind of convey what you want it to? And does it stand out compared to like other things that they might be getting invites for? So just looking at it kind of holistically like that, I think is important.
Yeah, Tess, I think, with what Sonia just said, I mean, knowing the audience, understanding, who they really are, who are the personas. And I think really one thing that I've learned over the years is you have to understand what's motivating them to be at the conference, because people go to conferences for different reasons. Some are for education. Some, they are really looking for new partners. I mean, people have different motives. So I would encourage you to be thinking about what is the motive for them to be there, because you don't want to be tone deaf to the situation. So thinking about, okay, if you can really dial in who your audience is, what that persona is, and why they're coming there for 3 days or 2 days, I think then, to Sonia's point, you can capture them by, is it an offsite? Is it on the show floor? Is it in it? How do you capture them? But it should be convenient for them on their time, something that they're going to be interested in, something that aligns with why they are there, right? So you're not inconveniencing them, or again, so it's not tone deaf. I think that would be, something I would push you to think about. Great question. I wish I was faster with this chat, but unfortunately, my left hand is not the best. All right, so let's go into some of these things that we're talking about with this funnel: smaller events, more intimate events, moving away from the larger trade shows into different things. What are some specific things that you've done that maybe others can implement, others you think they should be thinking about? What should they be considering executing? I know it's tailored to everybody's business audience, right? All those strategic things that you talked about earlier. I think we should encourage people to be thinking that way, high level, not just as an executor of event marketing, but be thinking like a business person, right?
Yes.
But what are some of these things that you would encourage people to be exploring and thinking about?
I think it's like you mentioned, like understanding where your prospect customer is currently at. So
Yeah.
are they in need of maybe more education? If that's the case, then I would consider, like you mentioned, group doing a roadshow or
Yep.
lunch and
Yeah.
learn. And the way that I've kind of handled those in the past, working for different companies, and have been directed to handle those in the past by my leaders, has been, let's do the informative piece for part of the day and then take it to something fun afterward,
Yeah.
right? So you get
Yep.
the educational piece or the Q&A piece with leadership or product person out of the way, and then you can move on to like a social activity that happens later, which is really great. So you're able to kind of have deeper conversations too. Those have been great. I think if it's really more so just relationship building, I'd go back to like kind of having these experiences with people in market where they are, or in conjunction with the show they're going to be at. So, I mean, it can be a myriad of things, right? Like it really depends on where you're going. One cool thing we did at SOCi last year was we did this Porsche driving experience, right? So we had a bunch of prospects in Atlanta and took people to the Porsche driving facility there where they got to test drive vehicles, right?
That sounds
really
amazing.
Fun. It's an experience. It's, heart racing. Everybody's bonding over that. So it's nice, to kind of have something for them to talk about with their peers too. So when they go back to the office or work, they're like, oh yeah, this company, so she took me out and we got to drive these Porsches and it was really fun. And so it's something that kind of like resonates, right? So when they think of you again, they'll go back to that experience that happened and maybe the conversations that happened. So again, I think it's really about understanding where they're currently at.
Yeah. I
I
like
think
that
one,
ties back. Oh, sorry. I was going to say it ties back into what you said earlier, right? About you're going to get people to come out of their house to go somewhere, to go do something. You have to make it worth their while, right? And you're meeting them where they are at. Well, why are they there? And how can you make it worth their while? I think a lot of times, just you saying what you're saying now really has me thinking always like B2B gets stale sometimes, whereas like
yes,
B2C really gets it. And you see now all these, South by Southwest, the festivals, they're marrying up this concept of like education, culture, business, and they're saying, hey, like if we're going to get you out of town for 3 days, we're not just going to bore you in a
right.
boardroom or a conference. Like we're going to deliver an experience. Like let's go. That's, I think that it really ties a lot of what you said with connection and experience. And so if you're an event marketer, like you have to be talking about these things of like, how are we going to give people experiences that they're going to remember, to connect with them on top of, yes, I mean, you have to pitch yourself. You have to have the
Right.
conversations about their problems and how you solve them.
Right. And that's really why the cooperation between marketing and sales is really important, because
Yeah.
after the event happens, I really need to lean in on the sales team. I'm going to do my own marketing follow-up, right? I'm going to send them
Yeah.
a generic thank you note, or here's a newsletter about our upcoming webinars we have
Yep.
that you can join if you'd like more
Yeah.
information on X, right? Like, but I'm really leaning on the salespeople to kind of do that follow-up, a personalized follow-up with whoever participated or attended, and passing along more information, right? Like,
Yeah.
the salespeople can be my catalysts or my messengers in terms of passing on deeper content or sharing upcoming things that we'll be participating at. And again, like trying to move them closer and closer to the finish line. Right.
Yeah.
So that's a big part of it too. I don't want it just to seem like we do these events and that's it. Like
And that's it.
there's also like
Yeah.
content that comes along with it. And
Yeah.
like, again, it's part of larger campaigns, right? Like, again,
Yeah.
keeping that focus. It's not only about just the sale and the contract being signed, but it's also about, making them aware of the fantastic things that your company might be doing or new products you have coming out. So that's important. Yeah.
No, I like that. And I think this, this to me, it kind of, ties back to something I think that a lot of people that I've noticed on our show and just our communications with people are asking, which is post-show, post-event. I mean, what are some things that you're doing that maybe you've had success with? Like you've touched on it a little bit, but you have to be decisive, specific. You can't just wing it. So what are some things for people who are event marketers to be thinking like, and sorry, just not to get off topic, but that's the difference to me there is a difference between an event planner and an event marketer. There is a difference, right? As an event marketer, like, what are you thinking about post-show? How are you following up? How are you tying things together in a really campaign way?
Yeah, it's really hard, right? So I think, when we're talking about top of funnel, if we're at a trade show, let's say, and we're able to get data from the person that we interact with at the trade show, whether that's them filling out a survey or maybe filling out a form or whatever online for us. And it's a way for us to kind of follow up with them after the show when they've expressed specifically what maybe their pain points are, or what brought them to the show. Like you mentioned earlier, like what brought them here. So that way, at that point, we can kind of craft, okay, what are the next steps that should happen with this person after we've interacted with them? So do we drop them into like a drip campaign? Do they really need to be warmed up more to kind of know more, just have more awareness about us? Or is this a conversation that we can immediately push over to inside sales to kind of set up a time to have a meeting with them? It's really looking at kind of person by person at the information that we've been able to gather from them and then kind of taking the next steps there. I think it gets hard though, once you get low down further in the funnel. And that's when I said that sales is really an important piece there, because I don't necessarily have the relationship with the customer prospect. So at that point, I really need to have the salespeople kind of step in and continue to have those conversations and help direct me and the marketing team as a whole into what happens next, right? and they know like, oh, this person has, doesn't know if they have budget for our product, or this person
Yeah.
might not
Oh yeah.
necessarily, feel confident about how we do compared to this competitor. So,
Mhm.
having that information from sales at that point kind of helps drive how we direct this
Yeah.
prospect's client's journey after
Yeah.
that touch point. So yeah, it's a lot of that.
And that's cool, I think, because we've talked a lot about a few of the same things over and over again that keep coming up. And one is just how sales and marketing have to work together for effective events, because it is event marketing, and marketing and sales are tied together, from follow-up, right, to the goals and the plan and the initiatives. And, if you're an event marketer and you're not in tune, in touch, or on the same page as sales, I think it's a bit of a wake-up call to say, maybe I should set a meeting. Maybe I should have a conversation. Maybe I should be the one to lean in, ask the questions, and try to create a little bit of a bond there, or a plan for the future. We have another question, and I always take questions because I'd like to encourage them. So I do. I love the questions. It's great. We've had some really good ones over our live shows. We host these type of events, but still struggle with getting good attendance. The event isn't enough to get customers or prospects to leave the house to attend. We've had 140 registrations at a happy hour at a trade show, and only 7 attend. How can we ensure better attendance? I was going to joke and say better booze at the happy hour, but I don't know if that was even listed. Really good question there. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that? I have mine, but I'd love to hear what you think.
Yeah, I think it needs to be more than just the happy hour, right? So there needs to be like some kind of added, like you're upping +1. I always say, like, what's the up? What's the
What's the
+1 on
I
this?
love that.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah.
So, that could be something fun, right? Or it could be something serious, like, hey, we have this happy hour, but we're also going to have this amazing speaker come and talk a
Yeah.
bit, right? Or we're going to have the fun piece could be like, we're going to have this happy hour and we're going to have the sommelier come and do tastings. Like, you kind of got to one up all of your events. It can't just be like a dinner or a happy hour. Like, there's got to
Yeah.
be another incentive for someone to want to attend outside of that, for sure.
How about asking all of the key, I mean, depending on the size of the event or something, right? How about asking all the keynotes or people who are keynoting to be the guest of honor, right? So if you ask 4, you might get one that doesn't have plans that night, that wasn't going to be there, and you can co-mix that, right? And I love what you said. It could be fun, but it could be serious. It depends on the crowd. It depends on why they're there. Going back to what we said earlier, it is knowing that. And I think, yes, like, what is the up? What is it? Okay, yes, it's a happy hour, but what else is happening there? What is it for? And I think if you're throwing a happy hour, are you driving fun? Are you driving value? Are you driving connection, relation? Like, what is it that you're trying to do? The other thing I would say is, like, just the term we've always used is like this ground and pound tactic at the event. Like, you got to get the notion. Yeah. I mean, you got to get the notion out there that you're doing something. This is happening. It's going to be busy. People are going to be there. Make sure you show up. It's going to be a ton of fun. Like, you got to be a little bit of a BS. I don't want to say a BSer, so it's disingenuous, but you got to talk stuff up. You got to get it out there.
Totally. And going back to the partnership with sales, like really having your salespeople bought into whatever you're doing at the happy hour or hosting the happy hour, right? Because they're going to talk about it then nonstop to whoever they interact with the entire duration of the show, or even before they get there. Like, you need them to be your mouthpiece too, right? Because like I said, we can send marketing emails, we can send up the most beautiful landing page, we can send, great things on LinkedIn, set up great things on LinkedIn or tweet them or whatever. But at the end of the day, they're the ones that are like at the forefront of building the relationship with the client or prospect or customer. So they have to be the most vocal about it as opposed to us, and they're the ones selling it. So yeah, I think it's important. Obviously, if they haven't leaned in enough on those kinds of events, trying to get them to lean in more, and that's through communication and getting them bought in early.
I really like what's the up, because I think about like what, like, okay, but what, right? Like, okay, cool, you're having a happy hour, but what? And I think that's something to consider and really think about with a team, with others to whiteboard, you know what I mean? It's just like, it's a brainstorm. Like, what can we offer, and can you just try different things? I mean, I always say to people, don't be afraid to try stuff. Like, at least if you've thought it through and you try and you swing and miss, okay, so try something different, right? Swing it a different direction. What kind of crowd is it? What are they looking for? And I think if you come up with that, I do think you could take that 140 register, and from 7 to 10, how can you get 20, right? How can you get 30? How can you get 40? How can you build it to where maybe you have the best happy hour at that event every single year? There's something that's being missed. You just have to kind of find it. And I think it lies probably in the audience and why they are there. Yeah, for sure.
And there's ways to be sneaky, like, and sneak in, you know, if the feedback is like, we don't want to go to anything that's like serious, or where we feel like we're going to get sold to, or people talking to us about your company, there's ways to kind of sneak in the takeaway or the campaign. Like, I thought of this thing that we did last year in our booth. We had drinks, right? So we were doing like cocktails during trade show floor hours in the afternoon. And so we really tried to make it like a whole fun experience. But one kind of sneaky way for us to kind of get content out there was to make all of the coasters with QR codes, where people had to like kind of scan the QR code on the coaster and then download the content piece, and then they would get the cocktail. I like that. So it's like a sneaky way.
Because you see a QR code now, you do it. It's a very, it's natural.
So it's like a sneaky way of kind of like, you know, making it informative, but also like not over the top informative if that's someone's complaint. Or if the complaint is the opposite, like, I don't want, I'm looking for a serious kind of situation and not like a fun event. I'd rather get my questions answered. Then you kind of know at that point, like, okay, this is someone that I need to make sure we provide a moment with at the show, you know, whether that's in a meeting space or at a dinner, a smaller scale dinner, or something where you can have a kind of a deeper conversation, I think.
Yeah. And that's why I love to take the question. That's a really good question. Right. And another thing, now that I'm listening to you talk and my wheels are turning, I would think it's like, don't be afraid to do something different. Don't be afraid to do something outside the box. Don't be afraid to do something a little brash, a little bit unique, because I think that, like we mentioned earlier, at B2B events or B2C events, at conferences, trade shows, they're stale. They have been for a long time. Do something different, do something unique, stand out, give it a go. You know, we encourage our clients all the time when they talk to us and ask us about those things. We're like, do something totally on brand, totally unique, totally you, totally something that will catch, and people either will laugh, right? Or they will identify, recognize with it. They'll feel a connection to it. But if you constantly take a basic or simple path, you really can't ever get that wow factor to a degree. So I think it's a good opportunity with a happy hour, shake up that happy hour, right? If you're getting 140 registrants, start thinking, what could we do different? What could be the up? What could be the difference maker? And see if you can increase that attendance. It's a really good question.
Yep.
Okay, so we're hitting right on an hour here, and we still have 80% of the people. We have had good attendance on this. This is awesome. I really appreciate everybody listening and being on these calls. I honestly am shocked how many people are showing up every 2 weeks, but it's great that people are listening. And I hope this is building some community, and that people are understanding that there's others like them out there, whether more experienced, less experienced. Sonia obviously has a lot, and she's driving some good content and some good conversation here for people to consider in their own event marketing. So one thing that I always try to close with on this show, it's been a really cool piece for me, I think, that I ask people, is advice to your younger self, right? What is advice you would give to younger you, either thrown into event marketing or just starting out in event marketing? What's some advice you'd give yourself?
Wow, that's a tough question. Sleep. Make sure you sleep now. Get lots of rest.
Now.
Yeah, sleep now. Get lots of rest. I think definitely, like, I know early in my career, I really took things very personally. Like, when feedback I'd get sometimes from my counterpart on things, like I take things to heart very early in my career. I think I would just say, like, have some tougher skin. It's a long road. There's going to be mistakes. that happen at every event, which is a true story to anyone that does this for a living. There's always something that goes wrong every single time. So don't try to take things too personally because you're doing great. That's what I say.
I think that's really good advice, right? I love the idea of like being able to have thicker skin, whether it's criticism, whether it's things going wrong, just understanding that nothing's ever perfect, but it's really more about the journey. It's more about growing. And I think you can see that now as you've kind of moved on in your career and doing some really cool stuff. Well, okay. So Sonia, thank you so much for being here. I think some really great stuff that you said today, some really good stuff in our community that people are going to get to sort of listen to, consider, and hopefully start to implement and think a little differently, because you really dropped some good stuff in there.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate it.
You got it. Yeah. So everybody who came on today, we greatly appreciate it. Thank you for showing up. People that are repeat, people that are new. Every 2 weeks, Event Marketing Redefined. I am your host, CEO of Rockaway Exhibits and Events, Matt Kleinrock, and Sonia Murphy. Thank you so much for being here today. We appreciate it. And thank you for everybody who attended, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks again, Matt.
You got it, Sonia. Thank you so much.